Hello, everyone. Welcome to the M Building. We're thrilled to host you all here and share the space with you. And welcome to downtown Casper. It is true this has been a project of passion. I think it would have to be in order to sort of take on the beast, is what it's been called often. As you can see from the logos across the bottom, we have a whole bunch of a family of companies that we run, and one of the great things about this building is it puts all of our companies under one roof. So it helps my husband, Joe McGinley, and I to kind of manage a bunch of things all under one space. So I'm excited to talk to you about the building today, but I want to first start with the history of this space. It was constructed in 1964, and it was, these are precast concrete wings that you see here, and it is definitely an iconic part of the Casper skyline. And everyone really recognizes it. When you see it in pictures, you know what Wyoming town it is that you're talking about as a result of it. It's got a 177-foot steel tower out there, and these leaf-like blades that you see here are 94 feet outer diameter, but they bend in on each other, and they're 44 feet tall, 21 tons apiece. So they used wood frames here on site to pour the concrete of these frames to come into place, and there are 17 of them that create the dome that you're all sitting in. The building also has a ton of really interesting things, including incinerator rooms for documents. If I ever go missing, that's probably the place to check. It has vaults, it has tunnels. The city of Casper has a tunnel system underneath of it. Many of you may be aware of that. This building connects to many of those different tunnels. So lots of different safety deposit box rooms, so lots of different things in the building that make it really special and unique. There's a sunken garden, as you can tell right here outside of these windows here. Very hidden garden. My vision for that is to put art sculptures in there, and that way when people are walking along First Street or Durban, when they look down, they'll be able to see that specific surprise down there. So we're excited about what's to come this coming year for the sunken garden. And one of the very iconic parts of the building is this floating second floor backside off of the dome here, and it really does from far away look like it's sort of suspended in air in a really cool way. The ceiling is also really special. This is a picture of what the ceiling originally looked like back in 1964. You can see it was the first of its kind to have what was called squiggle lighting. So it had these pieces of plastic that you see here in a grid on top of it, and fluorescent lights shone through it. And it was the first of its kind to create a lit glow ceiling in that way. So it was patented and really special. We found parts and pieces of those squiggles when we did the demolition that were left up inside of the dome. And of course, we've got our second floor balcony that you see from all the way around. Made for some interesting construction. We moved into the second floor while the first floor was doing the construction, so this was all wrapped in plastic that you'll get to see here in just a few minutes while we existed in a pretty noisy space on the second floor. So the architect, Charles Deaton, was his name, and he worked with a partner and also a local architect that you see here, and he was very passionate about domed buildings and circular buildings, and he would say people aren't rectangular, so buildings shouldn't be either. And that was sort of his kind of claim to fame for what it would be. It was really prolific that Wyoming National Bank hired him because pretty untraditional architect to choose in a western town full of rectangles, to choose Charles Deaton as the architect to come into our small town and build this very unique structure. People come from all over the country to see it. We're on some sort of tour out there. If you want to see a mid-century modern building, we have people stop in and say, hey, can I come and take a look at your building? We had somebody from San Diego a couple weeks ago just sort of stop in specifically to see the architecture of this building. So definitely a big list. He did lots of things. He's sort of most famous for the sculpture house. That's that house that sits outside of Denver. On the side, it was in the Woody Allen movie, The Sleeper. He also did a lot of other banks in other Midwest cities. And this one, it was down in Colorado. No longer exists, sadly. And he moved on after he did a bunch of those commercial smaller projects to take on stadiums. So really took the idea of round buildings to a whole new level. And he had numerous patents on a movable stadium seating thing, and he did Arrowhead Stadium in that entire complex. He was an inventor and holds 31 patents for all of his different types of inventions. His first patent was on a game called Gushers. It's sort of like a oil field version of Monopoly, which is kind of cool. So that was his first one. He had multiple patents on things that existed here in this building. The squiggle lighting that I already talked to you about. The vault door that is down in the basement it was unique. And so he also had a patent on the cash drop from outside of the building that would go down into a vault room. Apparently it has two 90-degree angles to it, and he figured out how to get the cash to go down. So there's some patents on those type of things too. But he was not just a lover of buildings, but also of the objects that went inside of the building. And so he designed all the furniture for the space. That desk that you see here at the top corner this whole room was filled with those desks and side tables that would go for it. We found one of these in the basement. Super excited that we found one. It's in my office upstairs. Unfortunately, when I went to go find any of the other pieces, I was only able to find one. It sold at a mid-century auction about 7-8 years ago for $15,000. I asked the Wyoming National Bank and the Wells Fargo employees, hey, what happened to all the furniture? And they said they got dumpstered. So, such a heartbreaker for sure. But he did also design some really neat looking chairs and all sorts of different things. So really an interesting man with a huge, wide interests as far as architect and design. It's also of note that he was self-taught. So he taught himself structural architecture and interior design and all of that. He was never formally trained. So I thought you guys would be interested to see this. We found this in the basement. There was a model that was created in about 1962 and that Charles Deaton had made, and then they put it out to bid with the contractors. And I thought it was kind of funny. You had to pay $50 to get the drawings to be able to do it, but they'd give you your $50 back if you turned it back in good shape to pick up the drawings. So they wouldn't put it in the mail either. You had to actually come to Casper to be able to do that. So this is how they selected their contractor. So the bank finished, and it was really quite an event that happened here in Casper. People have told me that they used to sit on the curb across the street and watch it be built. Kids would come and get ice cream from downtown and come down here and see another leaf go up, and so it was quite an event. And it was even an event when the vault door arrived into town. It came in on a big truck, and people knew it was coming, and they went out on the street and watched it drive down. So it was a really big deal in 1964 to have this special space come into Casper. And one of the really unique things that it had about it is right here behind me on the backside of what would be our parking lot, there were these leaf structures that were walk-up teller stations, and they were really high-tech because they had their own temperature control. And so there was a whole series of drawings and work that was done in order to make those be temperature controlled. In fact, one of the big things they touted about this building is that it was mostly air conditioned, which is I always thought, like, what exactly does that mean? So it was mostly air conditioned, including these wonderful walk-up pedals. And I sure wish they still existed today. They had a huge, big grand opening. It was the thing to do. It was the place to be. The Wyoming Bugle Corps came and played. As you can see, the teller stations used to run the outside of the rotunda. And you could, of course, win a prize, maybe a console TV, a stereo, or a bike as they came into it. That's the actual page from the newspaper. Fortunately, the folks at Wyoming National Bank and the other banks that resided in the building were absolutely great historians and record keepers, and we have scrapbooks upon scrapbooks upon scrapbooks of every single time the bank was ever in the paper. And we have all those downstairs, and later on when we do a tour, if anyone's interested, I would love to show them to you. We've got a lot of copies of the original grand opening newspaper from that time. So some really great things that were able to be preserved, saved, and kept in the building. So the tower, a lot of people think it happened at the same time. It didn't, and it didn't happen by Charles Deaton. So it was a whole different architect that did it 4 years after in 1968. And they erected it, and they did it specifically to be the tallest in the city. And of course, it didn't take long for another bank to want to be even taller than that, but it was time and temperature. So it was the time and temperature sign here for a very long time. And then in about 2016-ish or so, Wells Fargo actually did the terrible thing of talking about taking it down. And so the city of Casper united and protested, quite literally with signs, "Don't take down our tower." And structural engineers were brought in, and it turns out when you don't put a big, huge, heavy time and temperature rectangle sign on the top of it that pulls wind drag, it's actually a very stable structure. So as long as we don't put anything on top of it, I think it will be here in Casper for many years to come. It's the number one question that people ask Joe and I, like, what are you gonna do with the tower? But the answer is nothing. The safest thing to do to keep it here and preserve it here is to let it alone and not put things on the top of it. You can actually go up. If you're interested, you can stand underneath of it, look up straight and twirl around, and you will have experienced one of the 7 wonders of Casper. Apparently makes you have a kind of cool dizzy effect when you stand underneath the egg beater. I'll let you guys decide if that's true or not. But you can actually go up the center of the column if you're not claustrophobic, I suppose. So it changed hands many times, a few times to different banks, and then it was Wells Fargo. So what Wells Fargo did is, you can see the open rotunda that Charles Deaton intended. They built this structure that ran the span of the entire rotunda and completely covered any visualization to those windows. I don't know why anyone would choose to do such a design thing, but they did, and they say there's a very large teller station. The other thing that happened is they dropped the ceiling to be right above where the windows were. So the space really looked quite different when there was no dome and there was this big, huge thing blocking all the light. In fact, when you came in, it was kind of dark, and it was. If you've ever been in here before, you can kind of attest to it not being a welcome, opening, large space. So we purchased it in 2019. So Joe and I are Philadelphians. We come by way of San Francisco, and we've been here for 14 years. And when we first came to Casper, I saw this building, and I was like, what is this doing here? I'm so excited. And I loved it from the start. When it came up to be for sale, I got this kind of crazy idea to take on the project. Didn't quite fully understand the magnitude that it would definitely be a passion project. A small example of that is we were replacing the plumbing upstairs, and the plumber came out, and he's like, oh, Diane, would you mind if I post a couple pictures about this? And I thought, oh, this is so cool. He's like so proud of this work, and he's proud to be part of the building. He's like, nah, I'm part of this Facebook group that's like the craziest things you've ever seen in plumbing, and I would love to like put this up there. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So, and that is pretty much indicative. Every time we took a wall down or looked behind something, we were like, what has happened? And what had happened is many people doing off fixes and offside things, and no one removing anything, by the way. Like, we have every fix and everything that was sort of left behind all of the walls as the years went on. So we had to do a lot on the insides of it before we can even really focus on the spaces that people would be able to see. So we started with MOA architecture, and we got initial design drawings going. They helped us kind of figure out a lot of the things that we needed to do for a medical space, and then we partnered with Casper Building Systems to do a design build on the building. I have 4 things that I wanted to stay focused on and not get distracted from. The first thing is, if I could restore it, I wanted to. We're going to renovate. We're going to need to reinvent it because it can't sustain itself the way it currently was. And then we need to reestablish it as a place that is beloved in Casper and go from there. So restore whenever possible. So if it was something that we could do, I wanted to do it. And an example of that is let me just say. So the example of that is making sure that the exterior stayed true to itself. So the windows are problematic. They leak, and the second floor windows are these beautiful ovals, and they're hard to clean, and they leak, all the things. But it's what makes the building really super special. So we want to make sure that we can restore those things and keep them in the space. So the exterior of the building, we try to keep it as much untouched as possible, and that's why we're not adding things off the side of the building. Being very careful with some of our HVAC decisions and things like that. Paint colors was another thing. Throughout the years, a lot of paint went on these walls, including the pillars that you see around you. They were kind of like a yucky ivory for years and years, and the drawings told us exactly what color paint to put on, so that was the color paint we found. So this bright white that you see here is the color that you would have seen in 1964. So when there was opportunities to restore, we absolutely did so. And of course, the dome being the biggest restoration part that we did. Undropping that ceiling was really super critical to getting it back to what it originally looked like. We knew we were going to have to renovate. Especially when we found out some of the guts and some of the things that we needed to do there. But we wanted to do it in the same spirit that Charles Deaton had done. He was so creative and so inventive, and this was really a high-tech space of its time. So we wanted to bring that same type of thing. I certainly couldn't put it back up a whole ceiling full of fluorescent lights, but we could make a nod to a glow and do some really innovative lighting that hasn't been created before. And so we really took a look at how we can utilize lighting. One of the things, and it's a small thing, is he loved to play with light, and on one of the conference rooms had these metal spirals that he hung from the ceiling, and then he shot the lights down through them, and it created a pattern on the conference table. So in a lot of our spaces that you'll see throughout the building have lighting that actually shoot and display light patterns on surfaces. So while we can't recreate that exact thing, if we could do it in the nod of it, that is what we wanted to do. There's an app for that. This whole entire building is, my 13-year-old's a lot better at figuring out exactly how to use all of it, but it takes some practice in a whole team, but everything has controllability, and down to the lights and the fountains, and everything works off of an iPad, and we're able to do some really cool integrative systems as a result of that. I put on there like hands-free restrooms. So this building was one of the first to have that little pedal on the floor that you would hit, that you put your foot on, and the water would come out, and things were very fancy to be able to hit, to be able to do that. Of course, we couldn't recreate that exact thing, but even making sure that like our bathrooms are also hands-free in that. The other thing Charles Deaton was really intentional about was seating areas. He really thought about how people would come together and use the space and collaborate in the space. And so when we don't have big, huge conferences like this space is filled with gathering areas and groups of seating that people can come together in. Art for sure. All the art you see in the building, 99% of it is from the state of Wyoming, and I'd say probably 60% of that are Casper artists. So we had to reinvent this space though. Couldn't be a bank anymore. The banks are going smaller and we're taking on these 40,000 square foot buildings, but it was gonna be a perfect fit for us and all of our different companies. So the first sort of example that you see here, this was a bank manager's office that would be located on the second floor here in the corner, and now it is a high-tech treatment room for the McGinley Clinic. A couple of fun repurposing type things. This is a rolling document storage shelving. So it's attached to the ground and you roll it with the crank and it moves in order to be able to do it. It's full, as you can see all the way on the left there, of like bank stuff, a lot of 3-ring binders. And so we've repurposed that to be the inventory for our medical startup device company that's also located on the second floor on McGinley Orthopedics. So those white boxes that you see all there are actually drill bits for an orthopedic drill. So quite a different repurposing. There was a bed in the bathroom. Upstairs, it's in the original drawings. There is a bed in the bathroom. I have no idea why someone would want to take a little rest in the bathroom of all places, but they did. And I asked the people at Wyoming National Bank, we had all the employees, we put out an all call, if you've ever worked here, come for a tour. And I asked them, like, what's going on with the, what's with the bed in the bathroom? And she's like, yeah, we would really take a rest. Like as women, we would kind of maybe need a minute and take a rest. And then somebody joked it was probably because of all of the cigarette smoke. So this entire thing would be offices that you'd be here, and at the time everybody smoked at their desk, and people actually talked about there being a cloud of smoke in the top of the dome, so not necessarily a very healthy place to hang out. And women would talk about how they would kind of escape for that for a little bit and lay down in the bathroom. As a female business owner, I kind of took a little offense to needing a bed to lay down in the middle of our day. That was not something that we restored. That got removed out of the bathroom upstairs. This is an example of a first floor room that was just like a conference room that they had here, and we've changed it into Elite Imaging, which is right here behind us, that has state-of-the-art imaging services in it. This is Ortho Now. This is the orthopedic Instacare that you see here behind you. Before it was just a bunch of cubicles. And that is a picture of once we removed the cubicles, sort of what the cafe looked like at that time and the kind of great transformation that space has taken. Our newest project that we just completed is to put in a media room downstairs in the vault. When we're on our tour, I would love to show that to some of you. The vault door is pretty cool. It got craned in, and it was, like I said, a big deal when it arrived. We've converted that room, though, to do some remote physician education, and I hate to say it while you're all eating lunch, but cadaver lab. And it is also a space that we record podcasts and other education, medical education things inside the room. So it's a pretty cool space and definitely a repurposing. But when you have a cinder block, all cemented room, it was actually quite perfect to be able to soundproof it and keep it out of the way. One of the last thing that was really important to me is to try to reestablish this building with local talent. So at the time, when it was built in 1964, the people of Casper and Natrona County built it. They were from here, the contractor was from here, the subcontractors were all from here, and I wanted to do the same thing. So out of the 33 vendors or subcontractors or contractors that worked on the space, 30 of them were from Natrona County. And I'm really proud to be able to say that. And it was definitely a big part of what Joe and I's mission was. And you know, we've got a lot of really talented people right here, especially when they're tasked to do something getting the opportunity to do something different. A perfect example of that is the tile that you saw in the cafe, super unique to the space. If you notice, there's these small gold pieces every once in a while, and that required the tile guy to cut every single one of those tiles to keep the lines in place. And I used to joke with him, I'm like, I bet you have a nickname for me when you go home to your wife, because it took quite a long time. The other people I am absolutely sure had a nickname for me were the electricians that hung the chandelier, that I'll talk about in a minute. This is a small list of all the people that we really worked with. My big partner was definitely Casper Building Systems. We had to take drawings and make some changes in order to make workflows work and functionality of the space work for what it is that we were putting into it. But you can see all of our local people who were involved in the space. And just great partners, super talented people. We had a huge party where we invited all of, instead of inviting, dignitaries and people like that to a ribbon cutting, we wanted the people who worked in the space to get to come with their families. So we had a ribbon cutting celebration here with all of them as a thank you. It was a really great time for people to get to show off, hey, this is what I've been working on, and this is why I have a nickname for Diane, and be able to show it to their families. This is just that rotunda before, and I wanted to show you a little bit of what it took to demolish and redo this. And as you're watching this kind of really cool time-lapse thing, it helps to have engineers in the house, by the way. Upstairs, they hooked me up with a lot of time-lapse videos. While you're kind of checking that out, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the engineering that went into the space. So one of the things that we did when we took the ceiling down, and we discovered that I had thought they dropped the ceiling because of an HVAC issue for temperature. Like I really thought like that's what they did that for, was to control the temperature in the space. And we quickly realized as we took the ceiling down that it was not about temperature at all. It was absolutely about sound. So when you were standing in here without the drop ceiling, it was like, you could be whispering over here and totally hear it all the way in the back. It was actually wild and pretty cool, except for it meant the space was unusable. So we brought in a sound engineer, and we had to do some crazy math to figure out what amount of surface space would it take to cover in order to make it be able to have these types of events and weddings and all sorts of things that we have in here. So all of those white panels that you see that are uplit there are all customized sound paneling that we have. That made a huge difference. But all the large triangle ceiling tiles that you see up there, they're about this thick, and they really made the difference. So sound you could hear it get better the more panels that they put up, and it definitely was a moment where we all held our breath, because if it didn't work, we were trying to figure out where else could we put sound panels in this sort of open space. So really excited that that came together. Since then, we've hosted lots of musicians. People love the sound of the space. We had Wyoming Symphony here last week, and in just 2 weeks, we'll have Casper College's Jazz Festival in here. So musicians are very drawn to the sound in the space. The other thing that we greatly worried about, that was my son there at the end, I saw y'all's on. His hoverboard was a perfect location for it. The other thing that we had to really worry about was weight on the dome. Like, what could we hang up there? Like, is all these, sound paneling is heavy. We also had to put in a fire suppression system, and it came in, and the pipes had to be this big in order to make it around, because there's no place over there for the water to come from, so they had to have enough pressure. Oh my gosh, fire suppression system almost did in the entire project. So we had to find out if it could take the weight. So what we did is brought in a more structural engineers, and what they did is they used cables, and from multiple points of the rotunda, they hung a long cable down, and then they had a wood pallet, and they loaded it with thousands of pounds, every single one of them. And then every day we would have to just hold our breath, is it gonna stay there? I'd come in the morning, I'm like, they're still hanging from the ceiling, yes. And so we did a pretty extensive test Turns out you could hang an elephant from the ceiling. It is incredibly capable of holding lots and lots of weight. In fact, our fire suppression system I was so worried about, and the chandelier that you see here is nothing compared to what it can hold. Very interestingly, when these 17 petals come together to a top disc that is up there, and that disc in the drawings you can see is only 3.5 inches thick. That is a marvel to me, that you can have snow and all of these different things, and it really speaks to the design of the building, that it would be able to hold so much and keep the integrity over so many years. Next one. Oh, there we go. This is what it looked like when we unearthed what was underneath the dome. Lots and lots of fluorescent lighting, things that happened. There's a pretty good visual of what it looked like with the drop ceiling. And so we went about repurposing the space. The first is the floor that you see underneath your feet here is an epoxy and hand-strewn gold flecked. I had no idea how they were going to get gold flecked into it that way, but they actually take the handful of gold glitter and throw it up in the air and kind of blow it around, and then it falls softly down onto the floor. It's quite the process to be able to do it. Interesting thing about the floor is that it dips about 3.5 inches in the center. So when you're looking at it, we had to be very careful with the lines that you see on the floor, because you would feel like you're going downhill. So that's why the lines stop at that center circle that you see there, so that your eye doesn't catch a dip. If you kind of look at it though, you can see why it does. Maybe one of you can tell me why they did that. We're not exactly sure why the floor would need to dip to that degree right in the center. It's the same thickness all the way through, but it is lower in that space. You can roll a ball and it would go across. You saw a little bit of, we called it scissor lift dancing that kind of happened in the space to get the ceiling up, and you can see them kind of testing the different lighting options, and this evening I think you'll get a chance to see a little bit more of that. So we're in it finished. So we had a lot of different work that we needed to do to convert it from a bank into the usable medical space that we have today. So upstairs on the second floor, we have the McGinley Clinic. It is a minimally invasive sports medicine orthopedic clinic. We treat 65 to 70% of our patients come from out of state or out of country. So if you can imagine, we've got all these patients that land at Casper International Airport, probably having a moment about where exactly it is that they're headed, and the drive to downtown. But what we want to do is, when they walk into the space, for them to know that they are going to be greeted with high quality care in the space. So they travel from all over the place. We treat pretty much professional athletes in every single area, a lot of professional soccer players, a ton of professional motocross racers. In fact, we're the official orthopedic clinic of motocross. We do some unique treatments here that aren't done anywhere else. One of those is a weight-bearing standing CT. So you can kind of see how it's a little bit of what it was before and the amount of things that had to kind of change for the after. The other company on the other side of upstairs is McGinley Orthopedic, like I mentioned. It is a medical device company. This is an FDA and ISO certified facility. We have a machine shop in Glen Rock, Wyoming it truly is a made in Wyoming product. It's an orthopedic drill, senses bone as it goes through, automatically stops on the far side and tells your surgeon what size screw to use. That's important because the standard of care is that 1 in 5 screws is misplaced. So we are addressing that need as a medical thing. We've had over 1,500 surgeries all across the country. So lots of really high-tech things. We run a robust internship program to try to keep young engineers and professionals here in our state. So with that, I would say that today I'm going to be here at 5 o'clock. I know you guys have like a little short break in your very busy schedule, but if anyone would like to come down and see the safety deposit box rooms, the tunnels, all of the different historical items that have been left, and take a walking tour with me of the building, I will be here at that time, and I would love to show you around. These are a couple of examples of some of the things that I pulled. I love their advertising back in the day. It's a big deal to get one of those buckles, I heard. And with that, I will close to take any kind of questions. Any questions about this space? Yes? Absolutely. In fact, Charles Deaton has a quote that was in one of the articles that said, "I have no apologies, I make no excuses, I like it." so absolutely, yes, it was, a lot of people thought, why are you putting this in our western town? This doesn't fit here. There was some hate mail that I think kind of came in saying, why you're ruining our city and the aesthetics of our city. But the team of architects really stood behind the design, and ultimately it's become a beloved part of the community. Although I have to say there are still people out there who really feel like it's not a fit in Casper, despite the fact that, I love it, obviously, for sure. But yes, they did, yep. Any other questions about the building or the process?
Diane, sorry, I would just say that the second time around got a lot more fanfare and support.
Oh, yes.
It did not want to go away once it was here.
Yes.
So
I think that's very true. That's very true. So we personally received great response from our community in saving it. If we had not come in, or somebody like us willing to really kind of invest in the building, it wouldn't have been long until it was no longer a functioning building. In fact, it already wasn't in many areas. So it really needed somebody to come in and save it. It's definitely a project that was a saving project. And as a result, I feel like our community is incredibly supportive of it being here and being downtown. One of the things that we're going to do next is replace the fence that you see around the outside. It is not original to the building. The original one had a gray granite wall that you see kind of right at the entrance that went all the way around the building. It was solid. We'll be doing a similar nod to that design as we move forward, because that fence out there is more than problematic, and it served its time. It needs to leave. So we'll bring it back to the original look that it had back in 1964. Someone crashed something into it in I think it was 75, and it said it was too expensive to repair it, so they just replaced the whole thing with this metal one, if you can imagine. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad that you would take some time to learn about our building and to be here. And hopefully I'll see a few of you at 5 o'clock. Thanks so much.